with One Road and One Belt initiative that was done, of course, by China. And then I just want to mention this one and one more integration, and then that will maybe give you a little bit more comprehensive picture about what kind of economic integration and regional integration exists today in the world. There are much more than we are covering today and last time, but this is some most important one. So this one is Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership. And as you can see here, we have 11 countries here. And out of all the countries that I have in bold, those are the countries that already signed. So their parliaments already ratified this Trans-Pacific Partnership. And once implemented, the 11 countries will form a trading bloc representing 495 million consumers and presenting 13.5 global GDP. So just another important economic regional integration. Now, this is the most recent one in the sense that it has just been agreed on the 4th of November 2019, and today is November 21st. Okay, so just, you know, a few weeks ago we got this one, and it was actually in Thailand, so it's a regional comprehensive economic partnership. So all of those countries actually agreed to create that one. But again, it has to be signed and ratified by all those governments. And what I have put here is basically who are the members of this latest one that hopefully is going to be into effect next year. So we have all of these countries: Australia, Japan, New Zealand, Brunei, Malaysia, Singapore, Vietnam. And as you can see, there are different members from different previously mentioned regional economic integrations that are part of this one. And I kept for the last one. Can you just click on this one? This one was actually initiated and created by Russia, and it's EUROASIAN Economic Union. This site is very, very useful for all of you who are interested in finding more about this integration. Hopefully it's going to work. Okay, so at this site, as you can see, all of those important numbers are here. So we have gross domestic product is $1.9 trillion, industrial production, 101.6% increase in from 2016, volume of external trade, and then you can click on all of those links and find much more information. So again, I'm going to post this tomorrow, so you will all have the access to this and find out what integration, regional economic integration Russia has initiated and how big it is and how important it is. Okay, now we can switch to the other one. Thank you. Any questions that you have regarding all those economic regional integrations that you heard so far from last week? Sorry, from Tuesday and those two from tonight. Okay. We just had it. Okay. Minute. So I have a question for you. Did you have time to go on YouTube and hear the other presentations that you missed? That's the first one. So how was it? Did you learn something? Of course, I like that answer. Good. So what do you do?
My name is Konstantin, and I'm working in digital marketing. I have my own company. Actually, I'm 33 years old, and now I want to work with the other companies in abroad of Russia. I mean, in Europe or Asia, and this is the reason why I'm here.
I'm definitely glad that you're here, and I hope that everybody. So keep asking questions and try to share some of your experiences with all other students. I think that everybody can benefit. Good. Okay, so we'll start with this question mark because the previous class ended with the question mark, so I'm going to start with the question mark. So what do you think? What will be your answer? European Union in crisis. Yes, no, maybe? I'll talk about a few of those, but whichever crisis comes to your mind. Is it in crisis? Do you know any crisis that is happening in Europe?
There was a refugee crisis recently.
I'll talk about that one. Any other crisis that you may be familiar that is happening in Europe? Okay.
As for me, they have two crises right now. The first one is political. As all of us know, we have this situation with Brexit and this instability in whole region due to this struggle between Europe and Great Britain. And the second one is economic, because we have a few countries such as Greece or Spain, even, which are like which have a lower economical potential and lower GDP, and that's why other countries should help them to improve their economy, like to Greece, Spain, and other countries. And that's why these developed countries like Germany or France are not really happy because they could spend this money for themselves, for their citizens, but need to spend it for citizens of Greece.
Also, we can mention this problem with migration. It's some kind of social crisis.
Anything else that somebody would like to add? I guess, okay, sorry. No, because they need to hear it.
Italy is about to become a new Greece. So I don't know. My Italian friends are really worried about that their government are still taking loans from the European Union, so they cannot repay. So yeah.
Well, I guess that my computer was hacked. I guess because you got everything that I was that I'm planning tonight to cover pretty much. So I have to find out who hacked my computer, and you figure it out about all those crises. I'm definitely going to mention those three: European Monetary Union in Greece, Brexit, and migration crisis. I will start with Greece. Actually, last time we mentioned Maastricht Treaty, and we mentioned that in Maastricht all those member countries had agreed to actually engage and embark on the higher level of economic integration, and that meant to create European Monetary Union. As some of you mentioned even tonight, countries that are member of European Union are, most of them are really quite well-developed countries, but nevertheless, they're at a different level of economic development, and they may have different social, economic, and political policies toward, let's say, monetary policy, fiscal policy, interest rates, government budget, and all of those sort of things. So basically, Germany and other countries who joined Germany in this in this role, they came up with certain criteria that all potential countries that will like to join this monetary union will have to fulfill. So if you don't fulfill those criteria, you cannot then actually have euro as your national currency. The reason why all of those criteria were accepted and why they were actually created was initiated again by Germany, and they had a very bad experience with hyperinflation. And because they had a very bad experience with hyperinflation in the late 20s and the beginning of 30s, they said we cannot allow governments to run high budget deficit. We cannot allow governments to have high inflation. And as you can see, what are the measures of these converging criteria? Price stability, sound and sustainable public finance, durable of conversion, and exchange rate stability. So all of those criteria should be fulfilled by every potential candidate to join European Union, which means harmonized consumer prices inflation. So basically, prices cannot move more than 1.5% above the rate of three best performing member states. So inflation has to be kept very low. Another way in sound and sustainable public finance, there shouldn't be excessive deficit. Durability and conversion, there has to be long-term interest rate, not more than 2% points above the rate of three best performing member countries. So if the best performing member countries have 2% interest rates, the other potential candidate cannot have higher than 4% interest rate in their countries. And then finally, they have to actually participate in exchange mechanism. And so all of those criteria were supposed to be followed. But as you probably discovered in your young lives, one is theory, one is what we should do, and then very often is another thing what we really do. So in this particular case, believe it or not, when the time came and all those countries that were potential member countries of European Monetary Union and all their economic performances were put on the sheet of paper, and you want to check, do they have this, do they have this, do they have this, do they have this? Well, even Germany didn't fulfill all those criteria. However, as we know, there are a number of countries, now already 19, who are member countries of European Monetary Union. One of the criteria was also that the budget deficit can actually not run very high. I think it was like 60%. However, Germany at that time had a very high budget deficit. The reason for their very high budget deficit was that reunification of East and West Germany cost a lot of money. So basically, they have to pay from their budget, so they were running a deficit. So that's what I said. Even Germany didn't fulfill all of that criteria. Now, Greece didn't join initially this European Monetary Union. They actually joined later. And based on this report that was done by European Union, the conclusion of that report, when they were evaluating did Germany fulfill all those criteria, was Greece has achieved a high degree of sustainable convergence by reference to all four criteria. Consequently, Greece fulfills the necessary conditions for the adoption of the single currency. So it looked like everything was perfect. Greece, we have a check mark for all of those four criteria. But maybe some of you heard about something that is called creative accounting. Do we have any accountants here or interested in accounting? Well, creative accounting basically meant in this case that those numbers that they presented to European Monetary Union were maybe not exactly the correct numbers. So they will accept it despite the fact that they really didn't fulfill all those required criteria. And as you can see here, the budget said the deficit was 1.5, but actually the real shortage was 8.3%. And Maastricht Treaty was saying it can only be 3%. the president that was later on elected, I mean, he was realizing that something is wrong, and he basically asked people who were running the country administration before he arrived, like, what should we do? I mean, we have to put our budget in place. But again, you remember they always said, look at the history, look at the context. In that particular time, Greece was already selected to host Olympic Games. So he was advised that, listen, we are having the Olympic Games in a few months, and we cannot upset the whole population and start having strikes and everything just before the Olympic Games. So forget about thinking about, reducing the budget deficit. Let's postpone that discussion for later. As you can imagine, each country, when they actually qualify, and Russia and Soviet Union qualified a few times and had those Olympic Games here, it cost a lot of money. And Greece had to build a lot of facilities. And obviously they didn't have that money. So what did they do? They borrow money, exactly. Now they're a member of European Monetary Union. Germany is a member of European Monetary Union. So what do you think? At which interest rates Greece was borrowing that money? At the higher interest rates or at the lower interest rates? They were borrowing exactly at the lower interest rates, because now the international financial community, when they were looking at Greece, they were looking at European Monetary Union, because it's the same currency. So that European Monetary Union is stable, euro is stable, so they actually qualified for those loans, a lot of those loans, at the much lower interest rates that otherwise international financial markets will be giving them if they will be just focusing on their economic performances at that particular time. And as you can imagine, all the numbers that I was showing you before, and all those criteria and all that budget deficit and all of those expenditures really exploded. Before we go there, let's just be sure that we understand what European Monetary Union is all about. So we have a single currency for all those 19 states. When you have a single currency, that means that you will have to have the same monetary policy. Monetary policy, when you think about all of you who are studying economics and all of you who are not studying economics, monetary policy, always think about interest rates. So interest rates should be the same, or there should be a very small fluctuation, because after all, we all have the same currency. But all of those countries have their own economies. And some economies are big, some economies are small, some economies may be in a booming phase, some economies may be in the downsloping phase, in a recession phase. And when you study economics, and particularly when you study monetary policy, you always think, interest rate. How can I stimulate economic activities? With lower interest rates or with higher interest rates? With lower interest rates, absolutely true again. So, if the country is starting to actually needs, jump start of their economy, you need to stimulate economy. You want to reduce interest rates. Interest rates are low. That means a lot of companies now can borrow an individual's money, and they can start their own businesses, they can expand their businesses, and the economy is going to pick up. Very good. However, if you have in that same monetary union a country that is actually in expansion phase, very often when we have an expansion, we have inflation. So what for that country will be the right interest rate policy, low or high? You want to fight inflation. How can you fight inflation with monetary policy? You want to reduce the quantity of money in circulation. And you will reduce the quantity of money in circulation if you stimulate people to save. Will people save if the interest rate is high? Or will they save more if the interest rate is low? Of course, they want to make some money. So again, this country will actually prefer that the interest rate will be high, where this country will prefer that the interest rate will be low. However, we have one monetary policy, so interest rate has to be almost the same no matter which country we are talking about. So this is, to begin with, a very big problem. Now, in other countries, when you have a situation like this, countries have another policy that can use and fight this issue with, high interest rate, low interest rate, and all of that, or the same interest rate. And that is fiscal policy. Fiscal policy is everything dealing with taxes and everything dealing with government expenditures in this particular case. However, European Monetary Union, when it has been created, they said no common fiscal policy. So at one hand, you have a pressure for the same interest rates, but on the other hand, you actually don't have a way how you can help those countries that need to be stimulated. I'm going to give you an example of US. US has 50 states. And those states are different in size, they are different in their GDP, in population, but also they may be going through different economic cycles. I'm going to use a very simple one because I'm coming from Florida, and we have from time to time that the nature likes to play a game with us, so we have a hurricane. So when a hurricane happens, you have the part of the country, of the state that has been devastated. The houses are gone, the businesses are gone, the schools are gone, and all of that. So basically, in a situation like that, we will need to stimulate economy. However, we will need lower interest rates. However, United States has one Federal Reserve interest rate. So I can't have one interest rate for Florida and another interest rate for Alabama or whatever. However, United States has a common fiscal policy. What does that mean? That means a federal budget that every person actually who works has to contribute through taxes to that federal budget that goes to Washington. And in the situation like this, when we have actually a nature devastation, from that government funds, from that government budget, money now goes to those parts of the counties that were affected negatively with this hurricane. So fiscal policy is very powerful because we can create jobs. We can give better opportunities for those people to recover. European Monetary Union doesn't have that. So in the situation of Greece, if Greek economy is going down, they will like low interest rate, but there is no money available from that European budget to come to rescue that country. So this was actually recognized as the biggest challenge the very same moment when European Monetary Union was created. But people were thinking, well, maybe this is never going to happen, so we don't need to experience this particular part. Another thing that was also happening was European Central Bank was created. And it was said that European Central Bank will not defend any particular country if that particular country has any budget deficit problem. So that was on their side saying, you know, every country needs really to think very carefully about their monetary and fiscal policies, and if you get in trouble, it's your trouble. However, you have one currency. So if you have one currency, well, if Greece is in trouble, Europe is in trouble. Because on international markets, euro is going to go down. So again, those two things initially were created as a kind of threat to any potential country, the member of European Monetary Union that may actually enter in any kind of difficulties that European Central Bank is not going to defend. But it was almost without any doubts that people knew that the European Central Bank will have to defend a country with a problem. And you remember that old saying, I think it was Keynes that said, if you own the bank $1,000, it's your problem. If you own the bank $1 million, it's a bank's problem. Because it's a huge amount of money that now actually can rock the boat, rock that bank down. So, any questions here? Yep, okay.
Is there any way to synchronize different states, different countries in their economical phases?
As far as if we're talking about United States, yes. If we're talking about Europe, based on all of these criteria, it's not, and that's the problem.
Maybe I missed the point. How U.S. government synchronize different states? Can you repeat my?
Sure, of course. Again, if there is a crisis, and I use the example of that weather-related crisis that is definitely going to affect the economy. U.S. government has a budget, has money that can then actually send that money to that particular region and help them. So that's how. And in this case, that doesn't exist as an option because they don't have common fiscal policy. Any other questions?
And in this case, what's the advantage benefit, for example, for Germany from this common currency? Why they can't return back the Deutschmark?
Excellent question as well. And in economics, you remember all of you guys who are taking international economics, I always said, think about opportunity cost. Think about trade-offs. So very good question. Why did Germany enter into this whole thing of European Monetary Union? Why Germany, with the strongest currency in the whole Europe, gave up its own currency, gave up its own independence to have its own independent monetary policy, to join this union with the countries, and I don't want to name the countries, with the countries with the much, much more problems with the inflation rates, with the currency, with stability of their governments, and particular economics. So why do you think Germany had to win something, had to gain something?
I think in case of Germany, companies get less waste because they have same currencies that different other European Union countries, and it's easy to invest and get money.
That's a very good argument, and that's generally the argument for why we should have European Monetary Union. Because if we have already this free movement of goods and services, and free movement of people, and free movement of capital, wouldn't be easier to have one currency so we don't spend money of exchanging, converting one currency to another. So in general, that is the argument for European Monetary Union. And yes, being the largest economy in Europe, they find that as a very important thing, but that wasn't the reason why they gave up their own currency. Any other creative thinking here? Second. No, it wasn't that. What did I say, Alina? What did I say always? When we think about economics, what do we need to think about? Yeah, but economics is always related to politics. It's always related. So think about this. Germany was and is the most developed, the strongest economy in Europe. Germany wanted to be recognized not only as the strongest economy in Europe, but it wanted to be recognized, it wanted to regain, actually, its prestige that was lost after the First and Second World War. And because of that political reason, they gave up their own currency. So then they will be actually the leader of this even wider, bigger monetary union than just their own currency. So if you look about every single country, why they join European Monetary Union, there are a lot of those political reasons why every single country identify themselves like, I can benefit from this. And it has nothing to do with economics, for that matter.
They already had this European Union, and is it not enough for them? Why they need to join this European Monetary Fund Union?
It wasn't enough. It wasn't enough because they were not recognized as the leading entity in this part of this, because European Monetary Union is much stronger integration. If you remember when I was showing that, like circles, and it's much deeper integration. So you have much more influence on all the member countries of the European Union than you have influence on the member countries of the European Union. Because this time you deal with money and with the currency, and that's where a lot of power is. Any other question? Okay. Now, this graph is really shocking in a certain way. And because this one graph basically compares Great Depression in United States and Greece. And this is 1929, 1938. And this is Greece 2008, 2014, when actually they have this really, really terrible situation. So as you can see, GDP during that crisis, the Great Depression, went down here. But you see how significant downturn of the Greek economy that was. So for them, that crisis was equivalent to Great Depression. And we know the consequences of Great Depression in the late 20s and the beginning of 30s. Devastating consequences. Huge number of people without jobs, really, really poverty. Companies are closing, absolute devastation. So now you can imagine how those people felt when they entered this really, really, really great recession for them. Okay, now this is the Greek government debt ratio to GDP. As you can see, from 2006, actually it went to 177, and during those 177% is government debt to GDP. So they own much more. They own much more money than they make. GDP is gross domestic product. So another devastating economic indicator as well. This question, again, why Europe had this problem, why European Union had this problem, did anything go wrong with European Monetary Union? or was this already predictable? And as I put it here, and I already talked about it, European Monetary Union wasn't well prepared to handle the crisis of this magnitude and of this character. So there were no really institutions there that were able to handle this crisis. European Central Bank wasn't supposed to act as a lender of last resort. As I said, European Central Bank is exactly specifically said, we are not going to defend country if they enter in the budget deficit problem. Common currency without a banking union, including a common deposit guarantee system. Common currency without a fiscal union. And as I said, there was no fiscal policy. So there was no money, there was no funds that can be now directed to Greece to rescue them in that particular case. And common currency without a fiscal union, I did say that twice, I guess. Common currency without a common and comprehensive financial supervision system. There was no common monetary policy without a common economic and financial policy. And a far too small budget to defend the European Union, any member country. I mean, European Union does have a budget, but it's like in the size so small that you can't actually make any significant impact with that one. However, as Albert Einstein sometimes said, and I'm sure that it maybe even people who said that even before him, in the minds of every crisis lies a great opportunity. So, have you ever experienced any crisis that were actually good to happen because it made things better? It made us think about where our problems are, and it pushes us to look for the solutions. No? Well, this particular thing did move European Monetary Union to start thinking and rethinking about their policies, about maybe changing some of those things, about all of those converging criteria that they initially put it up in order for all those countries to qualify. And believe it or not, actually, European Central Bank did come for rescue of Greece. Not only them, but it was European Central Bank and International Monetary Fund that did came up with a significant amount of money, and not only once, and not only twice, but actually 3 times. And as I put it here, under the pressure of the crisis, the euro has actually started to reform itself. And now, you know that I like to show that in the video. So this one is 5-minute long history lesson.
This video is sponsored by Skillshare. Go to skl.sh/theplainbagel to get a free 2-month premium trial. In the world of finance, we are often quick to forget the tragedies of the past, yet valuable lessons are to be had by exploring their causes and effects. After all, in a world of ever-changing rules, products, and services, history is the one constant that can guide us through the ambiguity. So let's take a 5-minute history lesson on today's Plain Bagel. It's 1999, and the Greek government is in a bit of a pickle. The European Union has just launched a fancy new currency, the euro, that will be shared by its members. But even though Greece is part of the EU, they have left off the invite. You see, despite massive tax evasion problems, the Greek government has been spending to boost social benefits and wages, which has caused their debt to GDP to rise well above the 60% required to adopt the currency. So now they must decide between cutting back spending or missing out on the Eurozone party. Unless, of course, there's a third option. You see, Goldman Sachs, an American investment bank, comes along with an idea, a way to meet the currency adoption criteria by masking the government's debt load through currency swaps. It involves a bit of lying, but this way the country can avoid radical reforms and reap the benefits of the euro, a win-win. So Greece gives it a shot, using the sleight of hand to adopt the currency in 2001. And sure enough, the stunt pays off. The currency brings with it more trade, and since the euro allows Greece to pay back off the financial strength of its fellow Eurozone members, the government gains access to better financing, enough to even bring the Olympics home for 2004. Sure, debt to GDP continues to rise above 110%, and things are a little precarious, but hey, the economy is growing, there's plenty of EU money funding the budget deficit, and so long as things keep rolling, everything will be... That's not good. Looks like a real estate crisis in the US has triggered a global recession, and it's hitting Greece like a train. GDP is falling as tourism and shipping slow down, with the Athens Stock Exchange plummeting 65% in 2008. Worse yet, borrowing costs are increasing. Oh, and that shared currency we fought so hard for? Well, it's preventing Greece from stabilizing through monetary policy. And just in case things didn't look bad enough, surprise, in 2009, it's revealed that the government has been cooking the books, and its budget deficit is not 6.7%, but double that. Whoops. I mean, more than double the original estimate. Borrowing costs skyrocket as the entire country's credibility is smashed like a plate on the floor. Opa. On April 27, 2010, with a debt to GDP of 127%, the country's credit rating is dropped to junk, plummeting Greece towards default as it begins to drown in its pile of public debt. But look, on the horizon, is it a bird? Is it a plane? No, it's a buttload of money. The Troika, a group consisting of 2 EU entities and the International Monetary Fund, has come to bail Greece out in a bid to save the EU from the ramifications of a Greek default. Here's the plan. Lend Greece 110 billion euros to avoid default, use the bailout money to pay off expensive creditors, get the government to commit to higher taxes and lower spending to bring the country back into a surplus, and wait for this recession to blow over. So, on May 2nd, 2010, the Troika tosses Greece a lifeline, and... damn. The bailout doesn't quite fix the problem. In fact, the austerity measures have put further pressure on GDP and brought debt to GDP up to 172% by 2011, with creditors quickly draining the bailout funds. This is bad, and the Troika realized that more drastic measures are required, so they devised a new plan. Give Greece another 130 billion euros, negotiate with creditors to cut the country's IOU by 53.5%, get the government to commit to further austerity measures to bring the country back into a surplus, and wait for this depression to blow over. So on February 21st, 2012, the Troika prepares the largest sovereign debt restructuring in history, tosses Greece its second lifeline, and success! The program grabs a hold, and after 2 years of further tax reforms, layoffs, and wage cuts, the government reports a structural surplus. But wait, Greece is starting to fight back. You see, the Troika's bailout terms they're helping the government get a handle on its debt are causing unrest at home, with Greeks bearing the burden of falling wages, rising taxes, and unemployment above 25%. So when a snap election occurs in 2015, the people break over 40 years of two-party rule and elect a new anti-austerity party to office in a bid for change. The new prime minister promises to boost spending and throw down the gauntlet to the Troika to renegotiate terms, raising tensions between government and the Troika until the country's lifeline snaps and, ladies and gentlemen, all hell breaks loose. Creditors flee Greece once again, and a liquidity crisis emerges, with fear gripping the country amid concerns of Brexit, Greece's departure from the EU. Negotiations with the Troika fall through as even its members clash, and on June 30th, 2015, with the government unable to secure any further debt relief, Greece defaults, missing a 1.6 billion euro debt payment to the IMF, the first developed country to ever do so. The foundation of Greece's economy begins to crack as the government shuts down its stock exchange and banking system. Greeks continue to fight against a new bailout proposed by the EU, but at this point, with the country in financial purgatory, Brexit inching closer, and no more leverage for negotiation, on July 16th, a very desperate government throws in the towel, grabbing a hold of the EU's third lifeline and accepting an 86 billion euro bailout in August. And so, with the fight to boost spending meeting a dramatic end, the Greek people prepare once again for a round of cuts, reforms, and hard times ahead. All in, the economy will shrink 25% as a result of the crisis. And while Greece has since finished its bailout program, the country to this day maintains a debt to GDP of 181%. And Greek people continue to suffer, with 1 in 3 Greeks at risk of living in poverty. It goes to show the terrible consequences of fiscal mismanagement. And as Greece continues down its road to recovery, let us not forget the valuable and devastating case study it provided. Thanks for watching, and thank you Skillshare for...
Okay, so how do you feel about all of this now? What lessons did you learn from this very fast forward video with a lot of data and a lot of devastating consequences. Okay.
Maybe one of them is if you've chosen one strategy, you should follow it till the end. And if you change it in the process, you will lose even more. You will lose even more.
Mismanagement is a huge problem.
Okay, there is also one lesson from this particular great crisis, and that one is related to any other country that may actually enter in the similar cycle as Greece. So what message did that potential country that may enter in that potential crisis got from this experience? If you are in crisis, there is something that is called moral hazard. Moral hazard is a very powerful concept. Not only in this case, but we have it in international financial markets. We also have moral hazard with this latest Great Recession in 2008. And basically, moral hazard means the following. Okay, we have all of those institutions. We have all of those companies. We have all of those individuals. And as long as they're doing well, they are pretty much doing well for themselves. And when in the bad times, when they should be actually paying for their mismanagement, if you want, they will be actually rescued. So this is the moral hazard. In the case of that Great Recession on 2008, and in the case of Greek rescue, all those three that actually happened, is that if you know that eventually a big brother, a big central bank, a big government is going to rescue your company, your country, where is the incentive for you to actually have well-managed policies? So that's why I want you to think about that moral hazard and the consequences, because in any other situation that any country may enter, well, they're going to have to come to European Central Bank and International Monetary Fund, and they're going to tell them, well, but you rescue Greece. Why are you not now rescuing us? Very tricky situation. Now, we have two more crises to cover. Brexit. How old is Brexit? Okay, 2 or 3 years. Let's see how old is Brexit. Meaning UK leaving European Union. Exit
This
European.
video is sponsored by Skillshare. Go to skl.sh/theplainbagel to get.
I don't think that's the one. I might be wrong, but I think.
Our most sincere congratulations.
the British people, in clear and unmistakable terms, have made their historic decision that Britain shall remain a member of the European community.
La parole est à Mrs. Thatcher. We spent several hours discussing the commanding problems of world recession and East-West relations. No money from Britain. We are the second biggest net contributor. So we're no slouch. All right?
How about Gibraltar?
In the meantime, the government has concluded that Britain's best interests are served by suspending our membership of the exchange rate mechanism.
We want our orders back. We want our passports back. We want our country back.
It is time for the British people to have their say. It is time for us to settle this question about Britain and Europe.
Is a sad moment for the European Union, and I want to say for Britain too.
The Article 50 process is now underway, and in accordance with the wishes of the British people, the United Kingdom is leaving the European Union.
Okay, as if you are following politics in UK, actually the Prime Minister resigned, and we have the new Prime Minister in UK, and now we are going to have a new elections in UK that are going to happen during our class. So we're going to see what's going to happen. Are they going to have a new referendum or already existed referendum? Who is going to win the new elections? And as you can see here, actually from the very first day, even before they joined, UK always had mixed emotions with the European Economic Commission initially and European exchange rate mechanism later on, and nowadays with European Union. So how old is Brexit? A little bit older than few years. And that, sometimes we are so much focused in the moment, which is good to be focused on the moment, but at the same time, we have to recognize that there is always a process that led us to this particular moment in time. Now, this was the explanation why Brexit happened. This one is happening after they have that election. And basically, in 2017, there are 4 reasons for the no European Union vote. By the way, you have seen that vote was very, very close. It was like a little bit more than 51%. So very, very, very close and pretty much divided country in that way. Divergence between the United Kingdom and the continent about the meaning of the European project and the nature of sovereignty. So that was number 1. A gradual estrangement of British political parties from the public. That was number 2. The aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis, because UK was also hit with this crisis, and people in UK also lost their jobs. And Brussels' lackluster management of the European Union problems. So it's a very complex picture why Brexit. Why Brexit at this particular time? And some of those reasons are actually internal, directly linked to to UK, but some of them are really linked to Brussels and the structure of European Union. And I think I showed this one time to some of you, but this is, since some of you are here studying film and perception and pictures, you can see from this one that many different perceptions can be created and communicated depend on your personal preferences. So we have two actually magazines from London announcing Brexit, announcing the vote, referendum. And who is going to interpret these two for me? No, I want my film people this time. My film people. Look at this one, and I will come to you. Look at this one. Which one, what is each of those pictures telling us? What is the story? What is the message? What is the message with this one? And what is the message with this one? Both of them coming from the same country. Both of them are talking about the same thing. Now I'm going to go to the very last row, to the guy who created very, very good video, and he's going to help me to identify those.
Okay, I think that it depends on the point of view of person who received this information, and at the left picture I see that it looks like they shows us this situation like in a bad way, that it's bad for, I think, for Britain, and yes, and at the right picture it's like a good information for Great Britain.
Excellent. And again, this is, yeah, so sorry. Next.
Well, maybe the first one, it's the split between the people that we're talking about, how people like split it in half by the votes. And the second one with Boris Johnson, and he's saying like we're out. Maybe it also means not only like we're out of European Union, but something like we're out of stock or we're out of money. I don't know.
It's always interesting the way we perceive pictures. He wasn't thinking about we are out of money, but yeah, that's an interesting. No. I understand, but that's always interesting, you know. For maybe you who are in IT or somebody, again, if you're thinking about advertising and all of that, we always have to test what kind of perception people are getting from the picture that we want to communicate to them. Maybe they're thinking completely something different. Last but not least, but maybe not last.
Okay, I will start from the left picture. Firstly, we should say that here's The Economist, which is about economy and the economy of Eurozone, and Great Britain will decline after the Brexit, and that's why they're against it. And this Britain flag, which is cut by two parts, and it shows us that it's not really good action. And the right one, here's Boris Johnson, who is for Brexit, and he stamps like up, yeah. And we are out. It's like a happy. I guess he's happy about it, and the British flag is not divided into parts, and it's whole. Yeah.
Very good observation. Yes, you're really right. But again, I always encourage students to look when you're writing about something, and it doesn't have to be related to international business or economics, but anything for that matter. Be sure to look for different sources. Don't just go with one type of sources that are saying this is the best, this is the, you know. Don't go with only those sources that are saying that this is the worst thing that could happen, but try to create your own critical thinking. And you will get it if you actually combine different sources. And we can always actually, when you're looking at some scientific research, And then you, particularly in, let's say, pharmaceutical industry, we can have that, you know, the research article is going to say that this particular drug is going to be very, very successful for treating ABC. But before you completely embrace the findings of that study, look in, as we say, those fine prints. And that means look at those small letters on the bottom that are going to tell you who actually financed that particular study. And if that particular study was financed by the first pharmaceutical company that came up with this particular drug, you have actually to have one big question mark if you can believe the findings of that study, because it can be very, very biased. Now we are entering this crisis, which migration crisis, and we can observe this crisis from many different aspects. And as I put it here, there are really, really many layers of this crisis. So one thing when we think about migration crisis, we can basically focus, okay, we can maybe focus about legal and versus illegal immigration, or maybe we can focus on family migration and labor. What does that mean? It basically means people are leaving because they want maybe better life, or maybe their, you know, loved ones are living in this particular country and they want to join them. But on the top of that, we also have humanitarian crisis, migration. We can talk about migration from that humanitarian standpoint of view. Then I put here, who are those people that are migrating to Europe, particularly to European Union? Who are they? Where are they coming from? What kind of culture do they have? Tell me something about them. I'm sure that you heard about it, you saw it, and all of that.
So there are a lot of refugees. They are from Syria because of the civil war, and there are some differences, so to say, between people from East and people from the West, from Europe. Yeah.
So there are some cultural differences. Yes, you're very, very right. Now, think about if you have people coming from other parts of the world to your country, how are the local people going to perceive them? With opening their arms, with, yeah, it's okay, or maybe not at all, or...
I want to say that some people can't be friendly with them, and someone will meet them with open hands, as you say, and media will show it, as you said before, on the positive way and the negative way too.
Thank you.
I think it probably depends on how migrants behave when they migrate to other countries. So if they behave nicely, so the reaction will be so.
But from last lectures, they can depend nicely, but from their culture perspective.
All excellent points, and all of those are really, all of your points are really pointing out to the thing that it is really complex topic, very, very complex topic. And it's not easy to say yes, it's not easy to say no, it's not easy to be right, it's not easy to be wrong. And that's why it requires much more open dialogue. And I always think we need for everything in general a little bit more information and a little bit more knowledge. We also have, I pointed here, if we are just focusing on European Union, we also have here not only issues with migration and particularly this humanitarian migration, but inside European Union, different countries are acting differently versus them. Some of them are embracing them. Some of them are like in Germany, Angela Merkel basically said we have this open door policy. Some other countries that are mostly coming from so-called East Europe, Hungary, Poland, Czech Republic, for example, they're saying we don't want immigrants from other parts. We have already issues inside our own economy, and so eventually European Union had to come up with really quota how much each country, the member of European Union, will have to accept those humanitarian migrants. And when you were talking, depending how they act, and then you said, well, maybe they act according to their culture the way they should be acting, but maybe not according to some local culture. We always have to deal with this reintegration of migrants, and that's a process. And that's, again, not an easy process. We already have in Europe, before this big crisis actually started to happen, we have people from other parts of the world, and the problems that were raised were actually because they were not reintegrated in the countries, in the communities that they actually moved to. So very, very, very serious issue. Any other comments here?
Yeah, and it's also hard to make conclusions about migrants and their behavior because they are all often perceived like a threat for locals. They take jobs. Someone may say they make crime rates higher and so on. But maybe it's like selective observation takes place. And there is not so much attention to what crimes are towards these migrants.
Really very, very good points. Thank you for those. Let me just see if I have. Okay, let's go with this one.
A stunning result. The UK votes to leave the EU.
After 43 years in an historic referendum.
When the UK voted to leave the European Union in 2016, some predicted it would be the beginning of the end for the EU.
It could be followed by other countries. That it is the start of the end of the European Union as we know it.
I think there were at least 15 populist parties across Europe who advocated a referendum to leave the EU.
But since then, the EU and the way its members feel about it have changed.
The people are slightly more optimistic now. Maybe Brexit will not happen, we don't know.
Could the Brexit referendum have actually benefited the European Union? Andrea Venson is on a mission. Today, he's in Milan drumming up support for one of Europe's newest political parties. Volt Europa is a pan-European movement with political parties in 14 different countries.
I found Volt because of Brexit. Brexit was the first spark that told me that our European values were in danger. I figured that something was needed to try to steer the direction that the UK, but not only, Europe as a whole was taking. And so the idea of creating something European, a European political movement. We dream about a Europe that is more united, more cohesive, where countries are not left behind.
But Andrea has his work cut out for him. Across Europe, a third of people want to leave the EU, and Italy has the third highest rate at 44%. But he also has good reason to hope, because since 2016, optimism about the future of the European Union has grown by over 20%, and people feel more attached to the EU than before the Brexit referendum. So what's going on? Is the European Union really gaining popularity?
In some ways, I think the EU is stronger because of Brexit. Brexit makes the EU feel like safety. It makes the EU feel like the organization that protects them from the kind of chaos that ensues when you try to leave. And that really changes people's attitudes towards what Europe is doing.
Even the most Eurosceptic political parties are singing a different tune.
I can remember Marine Le Pen appearing at a press conference just after the British referendum result. On the wall behind her was a poster of two hands breaking free of shackles, and it said, "Brexit, next, France."
Vive la République, vive la France.
If you look at what Marine Le Pen argues today, I think she's almost done a sort of U-turn, because what she is trying to advocate in France is not so much Brexit, than sort of reforming the EU from within.
Merci, messieurs.
It's a different sort of Euroscepticism because it's not about leaving Europe, it's about transforming Europe and trying to create a sort of Europe that she and her nationalist friends think suits their agenda better.
I think there were at least 15 populist parties across Europe as of 2016 who advocated a referendum to leave the EU or just advocated leaving the EU. Maybe one or two of them still do explicitly. It's really almost dropped off the agenda.
It looked like the Brexit vote would pose an existential threat to the EU. But it's not the first time the EU has faced serious problems since it was established, and some of the most serious ones have appeared in the past decade. In 2008, the world financial crisis led to recession in Europe. Countries like Ireland, Portugal and Greece had to be bailed out by the EU and were forced to implement austerity measures. Unemployment rates hit record highs and recessions deepened. This debt crisis was soon followed by the migrant crisis of 2015, when more than 1 million refugees and migrants streamed into Europe. Many of them were fleeing war and chaos in the Middle East. No country was hit harder by both these upheavals than Greece.
When the financial crisis hit, Greece was already borrowing quite a lot. I think its debt to GDP ratio was over 100%, and it had a very large deficit. Over the period of 8 years, GDP fell by something like 27%. That has left a lot of people much poorer than they were before.
A few years later, Greece was on the front line of the other European crisis, mass migration.
I think the EU has not quite realised what the cost to Greece has been of the migrant crisis that it has had to cope with, and also not just financially, but in many ways economically, but also socially, having to cope with this. Greece, I think, has dealt with it reasonably well, given its very limited resources, and given the fact that through the period of the migrants arriving in Greece, it was also having to impose very strict austerity in its own population. So it hasn't been easy, and the EU could have been considerably more helpful.
A recent poll revealed that Greeks, more so than any other European nationality, think that their interests are not taken into account by the EU. Yet Greece hasn't turned against the European Union. Since the Brexit referendum, the share of Greeks wanting to leave the EU decreased by over 20%, from almost half to just a third. Both the economic and migrant crisis in Europe have receded, and the EU has survived.
The people are slightly more optimistic now than before. So I think the Italians are trying to hope for a better future for the EU.
The founder of Volt believes there is a historic opportunity.
There are two allies in front of us. One is to make the EU a true political union that can actually support drastic changes in our society, and the other path is the one of becoming a loose coalition of states with not much future. And I'm really gonna fight strong for the first alternative, and I see plenty of young people that believe in the same values.
That ambition for true unity is always going to be difficult. The EU is made up of 28 different countries, each with its own history and interests. But what it has shown is that it has a survival instinct.
Over the past decade, every time that the EU has faced a crisis that looked like it might be an existential crisis, it's become abundantly clear that EU leaders have the political will to hold the Union together, that European countries have so much at stake in the survival of this Union that ultimately they do what needs to be done to hold it together. It's just that they often do that at the very last minute.
Hi, I'm Katie and I directed this film.
Okay, I actually found this one today, and I think I like it because it brought all those three crises that we talk tonight about. And now, as always, I want three comments from you. And I'm going to start with our IT management expert. Maybe, what did you learn tonight? What was interesting for you? Yeah.
Okay. For me, it was really interesting the situation, which was around the Greece before. I mean, not the now or after 2004. It was really interesting, and I think that's it, because all the other information I already know.
I need two more.
So for me, the most interesting part was this system, this information, how European Union works, and the lack of fiscal policy, and like it's a little bit common fiscal policy, and little bit clarify how does this union works.
I actually have a question instead of a comment, so if you don't mind. So I heard that there are some really strange things going on around Brexit. Like there are even some jokes that England right now is some financial slavery because European Union is demanding some sort of debt from Britain and not letting it go until it will pay the money. So what's going on?
Well, I guess we'll find out if they're going to leave and how they're going to leave, but the whole thing is always related to many more things. Money is one of those, and British obligations to our European Union are also there as a part of this. Also, the relationship and the borders between Northern Ireland and Ireland are there at stake, and that's a very, very touchy issue because there has been a conflict for quite a number of years between Northern Ireland, which is part of UK, and so that's also on table, and we'll figure it out how all of those are going to play out. Of course, the elections that are coming up in the beginning of first part of December are going to probably give us some answers depending who is going to be elected, in which way UK is going to go. But I need one more.
Well, I've never heard about this situation in Greece. Also, I love that funny short video about this country. And I heard about Brexit before, but it was interesting for me to learn something about how citizens reacted on it.
Thank you so much for tonight. Then we'll see each other tomorrow at 11 o'clock, and then we'll continue.